July 23, 1942. 13:20 hours. 8 miles west of El Alamein, Egypt. Oberfeldwebel Walter Schmidt led his infantry platoon across terrain that offered minimal cover, scattered rocks, shallow depressions, nothing that would protect against sustained fire. His orders were straightforward: advance across this open ground, engage the British position, visible approximately 400 meters ahead, fix them in place while supporting units maneuvered to flank. Schmidt was confident. His platoon was experienced, well-equipped with 2 MG-34 machine guns and supported by mortar fire from positions behind them. The British defenders appeared to be standard infantry section, perhaps 10 men visible, no heavy weapons that Schmidt could identify through his binoculars. The advance proceeded according to plan. Schmidt's machine gunners established positions and opened fire, suppressing the British infantry who took cover behind rocks and shallow earthworks. The exchange of fire was routine. German machine guns dominated. British rifle fire was accurate but insufficient to halt the advance. Everything was progressing as German tactical doctrine specified. Schmidt signaled for his assault element to begin advancing by bounds, using covering fire from the machine guns to close the distance. Then Schmidt saw something that made him pause. One of the British soldiers, partially visible behind cover, was holding what appeared to be a metal tube, barely longer than his arm. The soldier was kneeling, positioning the tube at a steep angle, apparently preparing to fire some kind of weapon. Schmidt initially dismissed it as insignificant, perhaps a signal flare launcher or some specialized equipment that wasn't a tactical threat. The tube was absurdly small, held by a single soldier without any visible crew or support equipment. Whatever it was, it couldn't be a serious weapon. The British soldier dropped a projectile into the tube. There was a muffled thump, nothing like the sharp crack of a mortar firing from a proper base plate. Schmidt watched the projectile arc high into the air, nearly vertical trajectory that seemed wrong for any weapon he recognized. The projectile climbed, reached apex, then began descending directly toward Schmidt's platoon position. The explosion occurred in the center of Schmidt's assault element. 3 soldiers were killed instantly, 4 others wounded by fragments that scattered across the open ground where they'd been advancing. Before Schmidt could react, a second explosion landed 20 meters from the first, then a third. The British soldier with the tube was firing continuously, dropping projectiles and adjusting aim slightly between shots, walking explosions across Schmidt's platoon with precision that seemed impossible from such a crude-looking weapon. Schmidt ordered immediate withdrawal. His assault element was taking casualties faster than they could advance, his wounded needed evacuation, and the British position that had seemed vulnerable was now killing his men with weapon he hadn't known existed. The platoon fell back, carrying wounded, leaving 3 dead in the open ground they'd been attempting to cross. The British soldier with the small tube continued firing until Schmidt's men were beyond effective range, then ceased fire and apparently relocated. When German observers tried to target the position with artillery minutes later, the British had already displaced. Schmidt's after-action report was confused and uncertain. Enemy employed small mortar-like weapon operated by single soldier, capable of rapid fire at ranges exceeding 300 meters. Weapon appears to require no base plate or crew, can be fired from prone position, achieved multiple direct hits on maneuvering infantry. No similar weapon observed in previous engagements. Recommend increased caution when engaging British infantry positions, as their organic firepower capabilities exceed previous assessments. German intelligence analysts reading Schmidt's report were skeptical. A mortar operated by 1 man, fired without base plate, achieving accurate fire at 300 meters, the description seemed exaggerated or confused. Mortars required crews, needed base plates for stability, couldn't be accurately aimed without proper equipment. Whatever Schmidt had encountered, it probably wasn't what his report described. More likely, the British had concealed a conventional mortar position that Schmidt's men hadn't detected properly. But similar reports continued arriving from other units. British infantry were employing small mortars that could be carried and operated by individual soldiers, that fired from positions where conventional mortars couldn't be deployed, that achieved surprising accuracy despite their crude appearance. German forces began to recognize that British infantry sections possessed organic indirect fire capability that German doctrine didn't account for. Every British platoon could bring explosive power to bear within seconds of contact, without waiting for artillery support or heavier weapons. The tactical implications were substantial and troubling. The infantry support problem. Britain's decision to develop and deploy the 2-inch mortar emerged from doctrinal assessment that infantry needed organic indirect fire capability at section level, rather than relying on supporting weapons controlled at higher echelons. German infantry doctrine centered on machine guns as primary source of firepower, with heavier weapons, mortars, artillery, anti-tank guns, controlled at company level or higher. This created effective combined arms force when all elements were present and coordinating properly. But it also created dependency on complex coordination and communications that could break down during fluid combat. If communications failed or supporting weapons weren't available, German infantry sections had limited capability beyond their rifles and machine guns. British doctrine emphasized more distributed capability. Each infantry section included a Bren light machine gun, providing organic automatic fire without requiring coordination with higher headquarters. Each platoon included a 2-inch mortar, providing organic indirect fire that could be employed immediately by platoon commander without requesting support from company or battalion. The result was that British infantry sections could fight effectively even when isolated, when communications failed, or when supporting weapons weren't available. They possessed sufficient organic capability to engage most targets they'd encounter. The 2-inch mortar specifically addressed the problem of engaging targets in dead ground, positions behind cover where direct fire weapons couldn't reach effectively. Riflemen and machine guns engaged targets they could see, but infantry positions typically included trenches, defiles, reverse slopes, and other terrain features that provided cover from direct fire. Conventional doctrine called for artillery or mortar support to engage such positions, but requesting fire support required communications, coordination, and time. The 2-inch mortar allowed platoon commander to engage dead ground immediately, placing high explosive or smoke rounds onto targets within seconds of identifying them. The weapon's portability was critical for this role. At approximately 10 pounds for the mortar tube and another 5 pounds for a dozen rounds, a single soldier could carry the complete system without impacting his combat effectiveness. German mortars required 3-man crews just to transport the weapon, baseplate, and ammunition, allocating substantial manpower to weapon that couldn't be employed by fewer personnel. British platoons gained indirect fire capability without reducing the number of riflemen available for direct combat, creating tactical flexibility that German units couldn't replicate. North Africa operations. The desert campaigns demonstrated the 2-inch mortar's value in terrain where concealment was difficult and conventional, indirect fire support was often unavailable due to extended supply lines and dispersed operations. Desert fighting typically occurred at longer ranges than European combat. Visibility was excellent. Terrain features that would provide cover in other environments were absent. Engagement distances routinely exceeded 300 meters. These conditions favored weapons with good long-range performance: rifles, machine guns, artillery. Light mortars seemed less relevant in terrain, where direct fire weapons could engage any visible target and where the open terrain made it difficult to find positions from which indirect fire was necessary. But the 2-inch mortar proved valuable for exactly those situations where desert terrain seemed to make it irrelevant. German defensive positions typically occupied wadis, depressions, or reverse slopes, any terrain feature that provided cover from direct fire. These positions were difficult to suppress with rifles or machine guns because the defenders weren't visible to direct fire weapons. Artillery could engage such positions, but artillery support in desert operations was often limited by ammunition supply constraints and the need to concentrate fire on high-value targets. The 2-inch mortar allowed British infantry to engage dug-in positions without waiting for artillery, placing high-explosive rounds into trenches and foxholes that direct fire couldn't reach. The smoke capability was particularly valuable during desert operations. Advancing across open ground toward prepared German positions meant accepting casualties from machine gun and rifle fire that would be lethal in terrain offering no cover. British infantry learned to advance under smoke screens created by 2-inch mortars, obscuring German observation while closing the distance to assault range. The smoke deployment was immediate and controllable. Platoon commander could call for smoke as needed, adjust the screen based on wind and tactical situation, and maintain obscuration as long as ammunition lasted. German defenders found themselves blind at critical moments when British infantry emerged from smoke at close range, transforming what should have been simple defensive engagement into confused close-quarters combat where British infantry had surprise and initiative. El Alamein operations demonstrated the weapon's utility during deliberate attacks against prepared defenses. British infantry assaulting German positions would employ 2-inch mortars to suppress specific strongpoints, destroy wire obstacles with high explosive rounds, or create smoke screens that masked movement. The organic nature of the weapon meant that fire support was available regardless of whether artillery could provide support. Infantry commanders controlled the mortars directly and could employ them based on immediate tactical requirements rather than requesting support through formal fire direction procedures. Italian campaign. The mountainous terrain of Italy provided ideal environment for 2-inch mortar employment, where conventional artillery had difficulty reaching targets and where infantry often operated without close support from heavier weapons. Mountain fighting emphasized small unit actions, where platoons and companies operated independently, securing hilltops, defending passes, or clearing villages without direct support from battalion or regiment. The isolation meant that organic weapons were more important than in conventional operations, where supporting fires were readily available. British infantry sections carrying 2-inch mortars could engage targets that would otherwise have required calling for artillery support that might not be available or might take substantial time to arrive. The vertical terrain created numerous dead ground positions where German defenders could establish positions immune to direct fire. A German machine gun position on reverse slope could engage valley floor while being protected from British rifles and machine guns by the crest of the hill. Conventional response required flanking the position or calling for artillery to engage the reverse slope, both approaches requiring time and coordination. The 2-inch mortar could engage reverse slope positions immediately, firing at high angles that allowed rounds to drop onto targets that direct fire weapons couldn't reach. British infantry learned to advance with mortar support that could suppress any position regardless of terrain protection. Urban combat in Italian towns and villages demonstrated the weapon's utility in close terrain where line of sight was limited and where targets were often inside buildings or behind walls that provided cover from direct fire. The high trajectory allowed 2-inch mortar rounds to drop into courtyards, land behind walls, or engage windows and rooftops that were difficult to hit with direct fire weapons. British infantry clearing buildings would use mortar fire to suppress defenders in adjacent structures, creating smoke screens that masked movement between buildings or destroying specific positions with high explosive rounds before assaulting. The weather conditions in Italian mountains, frequent rain, mud, difficult terrain, highlighted the 2-inch mortar's reliability and simplicity. The weapon continued functioning in conditions that would have degraded more complex systems. The simple drop-fire mechanism wasn't affected by mud or water. The steel tube was nearly indestructible under normal combat conditions. British soldiers could operate the weapon while wet, cold, and exhausted without requiring the technical skill or careful handling that more sophisticated weapons demanded. Normandy and Northwest Europe. The bocage terrain of Normandy created tactical environment where the 2-inch mortar's characteristics proved ideally suited to the combat conditions British infantry encountered. The hedgerows that characterized Norman countryside created thousands of small compartments where visibility was limited to 50 to 100 meters. Infantry combat occurred at close range, often between forces that were separated by single hedgerow and couldn't see each other directly. Direct fire weapons could engage targets that were visible, but the terrain created numerous positions where German defenders could establish fighting positions that were protected by hedgerows from British observation and fire. The 2-inch mortar allowed British infantry to engage positions they couldn't see directly. A British section, pinned by German machine gun fire from behind a hedgerow, could employ mortar fire to suppress the position, firing at high angle to drop rounds over the hedgerow onto the German position. The rounds didn't need to achieve direct hits. Explosions in proximity to the fighting position would suppress defenders, force them to take cover, or kill them if rounds landed in the position itself. German forces learned that hedgerows didn't provide safety from British fire. Mortar rounds arrived from high angles regardless of terrain protection. The immediate response capability was critical in fluid bocage combat, where situations changed rapidly and where formal fire support coordination was often impossible due to limited visibility and difficult communications. British platoon commanders could employ mortar fire within seconds of identifying need. No delay for coordination, no requirement to work through battalion fire support channels, no waiting for artillery that might be supporting other operations. The organic nature of the weapon meant that every British platoon possessed capability to engage targets with indirect fire, regardless of whether higher-level support was available. The smoke employment was particularly effective in terrain where visibility was already limited. British infantry would deploy smoke to mask movement between hedgerows, creating additional obscuration beyond what the terrain naturally provided. German defenders, watching specific gaps or approaches, would suddenly lose visibility when British smoke rounds deployed, allowing British infantry to cross danger areas or flank positions without being engaged effectively. The smoke could be deployed immediately based on tactical requirements rather than requiring advanced planning or coordination with supporting units. The final assessment. Walter Schmidt survived the war and returned to Germany with memories that included being driven back by weapon he'd initially dismissed as insignificant toy. The small mortar, operated by a single British soldier, had killed 3 of Schmidt's men and wounded 4 others in engagement lasting perhaps 2 minutes. Casualty rate that heavy weapons platoon might inflict with properly positioned machine guns achieved by one man with portable mortar that weighed less than the ammunition Schmidt's machine gunners carried. The 2-inch mortar represented British approach to infantry weapons, practical solutions optimized for actual combat requirements rather than impressive specifications or technological sophistication. The weapon wasn't powerful compared to artillery, wasn't long-ranged compared to heavier mortars, wasn't complex or sophisticated by any measure. It was simply a tool that allowed infantry platoons to engage targets they encountered during combat without waiting for support that might not arrive or might arrive too late to be tactically useful. The German dismissal of the weapon reflected doctrinal assumptions that proved incorrect under combat conditions. German forces assumed that effective indirect fire required formal fire direction, crew-served weapons, and centralized control. British forces demonstrated that simple weapons employed at lowest tactical level could achieve results that more sophisticated systems couldn't match because the simplicity enabled immediate employment without coordination overhead. The 2-inch mortar didn't need to match artillery performance. It only needed to engage targets that platoon commander identified, and it needed to do that immediately rather than after requesting and waiting for artillery support. The tactical impact across multiple campaigns demonstrated that the weapon succeeded despite appearing inadequate by conventional military criteria. In North Africa, Italy, Normandy, and into Germany itself, British infantry employed 2-inch mortars to engage targets, create smoke screens, and respond to tactical situations with organic firepower that German infantry couldn't replicate. The accumulated effect was that British platoons fought with greater flexibility and confidence than doctrine based solely on weapon specifications would suggest was possible. German soldiers who encountered British 2-inch mortar fire remembered the experience with mixture of confusion and respect. The confusion came from being engaged by weapon they often couldn't see, that appeared from unexpected positions, that seemed too small to be tactically significant but proved deadly in practice. The respect came from recognition that British infantry possessed capability German doctrine hadn't anticipated, and that proved difficult to counter even after German forces recognized the threat. The lesson extended beyond the specific weapon to broader principle about military effectiveness. Sophisticated weapons and complex systems provide advantages in situations where their sophistication can be exploited. But simple, reliable weapons that can be employed immediately at lowest tactical level often provide greater practical utility in fluid combat, where coordination is difficult and where delays mean missed opportunities or increased casualties. The British mortar that German soldiers laughed at proved more tactically valuable than many weapons that appeared more impressive but required more complex employment or couldn't be used without formal coordination and preparation. The small mortar, operated by one man, firing without baseplate, aimed by eye rather than sophisticated sights. That ridiculous-looking weapon killed German soldiers throughout the war and contributed to British tactical success across every campaign where British infantry fought. It succeeded not through superior performance compared to heavier weapons, but through being available immediately when needed, being simple enough that any soldier could operate it effectively, and being reliable enough that British commanders could depend on it regardless of conditions or circumstances. That practical effectiveness, achieved through deliberate design choices that prioritized utility over impressive specifications, represented the British approach to military equipment more broadly. Build tools that work reliably under combat conditions and that soldiers can actually employ when needed, rather than pursuing technological sophistication that looks impressive but complicates practical employment.